Hello and welcome back to the Laravel News Creator Series. Today we're joined by Brian Dainis from Curotec. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. Really excited.
Yes, yes. So behind the scenes, I just went through like four intros, but we've got it right now, and we're moving right on to this interview. Uh, so Brian, I know I've met you at one of the Laracons, so you've sort of been in the Laravel community for what, like 5, 6 years, or maybe even more than that now?
Yeah, so I just looked that up. I mean, I don't know, we've probably been like an official partner or sponsor of Laravel, I guess, since 2018 or 19 or something like that. I actually just looked it up because we started somewhere around like 4.2 or 4.3 working with Laravel. So I guess that was, I don't know, 2014 or something or 2013. When we first started, kind of diving in head first into the Laravel world. So can't believe it's been a decade, but here we are.
That's awesome. Yes, I was, one of the other ones. We end up having a lot of people that came in right around that Laravel 4.0 mark, or still when it was version 4. So it was. I wonder, or I don't. Maybe you remember, like what was added to Laravel back then that sort of caught on so much on that version 4
Yeah,
release.
I can't honestly tell you the specific feature at that time, but I think just in general, the framework was getting really powerful. And, I guess like for version one and maybe into version two, it was still kind of, new and still kind of developing features. Taylor was still kind of working out where it was going and making it a full robust development framework. I guess by version three, it was probably starting to get really serious. But obviously, you need to kind of get the developer, brands in the developer ecosystem out there. So, if I had to guess, I would say that around that time, 2014, it was a really turbulent time for frameworks. I think that was around the time when Angular did the total rewrite from version one to three or whatever they did back then. Cake PHP and CodeIgniter. If you're a PHP person, Cake PHP and CodeIgniter were the two big names at the time. Obviously, there's Zend if you're building some big like enterprise system. Symphony, those were all around, but the kind of the go-to, I would say, for like the SaaS world or for the agency world or companies that aren't giant enterprise teams typically back then in the PHP world was Cake and CodeIgniter. And I don't know, I think there's another one, Falcon or something, but I think they're all just
Fuel.
kind
I
of
remember
losing.
Fuel.
What's that?
I said I remember Fuel PHP back then. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember that one.
I vaguely remember it. There was like a whole alphabet soup of frameworks back then, but I don't know. I just something, I think CodeIgniter and Cake were the two big ones that everyone was using, and I just think they fell behind. Like Taylor just had a better vision. I think he kind of looked at the full gamut of frameworks out there, and if I remember correctly, I think he told me he came from the .NET world before PHP. So I think he kind of took the best of what was happening in the .NET world, and then looked at all these new JavaScript and Python frameworks that were coming out at the time, and kind of looked at what was working, what wasn't working in each of the ecosystems, and just really built Laravel right from the beginning. And even to this day, it blows my mind. Like you can run a couple commands, install Laravel, get your kind of foundation set up pretty quickly, and you've got a full development framework. You try to do that in JavaScript, you're still, installing, 5, 10 different frameworks and micro frameworks and packages just to get yourself stood up. So it still blows my mind that it's in 2024, we're almost headed into 2025. It's still like incredibly, ahead of the curve in a lot of ways.
For sure, for sure. Well, that sort of brings back memories. You talking about the Angular. Do you remember Backbone from back in the
Yeah,
day?
that's
Is
where we
that
started
is
before Angular.
so I'm outside of the JavaScript world now, and because I pretty much focus totally on Laravel and probably Livewire. But like, is Backbone still a thing, or is it just like totally done now?
I mean, it is like jQuery is still a thing. They're still out there, but I don't know anybody that's like building fresh on it. I think everyone's either moving into like Vue or React or React seems to have the most robust package ecosystem these days. I still know a lot of developers, a lot of devs on our team, and just a lot of developers in general that just find Vue more elegant to work in. And Angular seems to have really found its place in the Microsoft world. Most like .NET applications, for some reason, tend to, kind of, choose Angular for their front ends a lot of the time. I've seen it less in the open source worlds. But yeah, I think Backbone's still out there. Ember was out there at the time. We still have a couple clients that use Ember at Curotec. They're just, obviously, like when you build up a SaaS product and it gets really big and you have tech debt, it's, really expensive to make a big framework change. You have to have a really good reason for it. And, so a lot of these older frameworks just keep existing for that reason.
Right, that makes sense. So yeah, you mentioned Curatech. So why don't you, for those that don't know, like just give us a high level overview of what Curatech is and what you do and things like that that for all of us that don't know.
Awesome. Yeah. So I started the company in 2010. We'll be having our 15-year anniversary next year. I'm really excited. I haven't really figured out what we're going to do yet, but really excited to, kick that anniversary off. So we're a product engineering company at the core. So, our roots are in PHP all the way back to the very beginning. As I mentioned, we, built a lot of products in Cake and CodeIgniter in the very early days, also Drupal and WordPress and some of those other early Magento, even Joomla. We, way back, 15, 14 years ago, we hit some Joomla sites. But over the years, we've really honed in on SaaS product development as our core competency. We've got about 100 people in the company spread across the US and Latin America. And, really what we do is we build software products, whether it's for an in-house team at an enterprise or whether we're augmenting a SaaS team. At the core, we're a software product engineering company.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So like, I'm trying to think of a good example on like say I own a SaaS app and I'm just overwhelmed, so I can just hire you to come in and like help me with the coding stuff, and then I just run it and don't worry about the coding anymore. Is that sort of what you kind of think of? Am I thinking about that right? I guess is the right question.
Yeah, there's that great question. So there's a couple of use cases. I think about it if you boil it down to like the highest level, kind of two reasons people hire us or hire Curotech. One is that they want to build software, but they don't have the core competency of building software. So that's what we bucket into our project delivery engagement model. So in our project delivery engagement model, we have an entire engineering team, it's an entire product team rather. So everything from the product management to UX, UI design, front end, back end development, DevOps, project management, QA, all of the skills and phases of a software engineering project. We'll handle the entire thing end to end. And then when we work with the client in those cases, we're really speaking business language with them. We're talking with them about what are their objectives. We're pushing back if they have like ideas that have potentially to them unforeseen technical implications or technical cost implications or potential tech debt implications. We'll push back and we'll educate them, but we're really speaking with them at a business level. So that's probably about a third of our business roughly is what falls into that category. So that's kind of, think about that like a medium-sized to large-size enterprise company that doesn't have any software engineering capability within their organization. The other side of our business, which is about 2/3, looks more like a global global talent staffing model. And typically our customers on that side are either enterprise businesses or SaaS companies, more often SaaS companies, that, software development is a core competency either within their entire company or at least the team that we're working with. So they're going to have like, a CTO and VPs of engineering and, principal and staff level engineers and, senior and full stack and mids and juniors and, DevOps, like they've got all of that already built out in-house. So they've got a full software development motion within their organization. And there's a few different reasons they work with us. So One is they have a bottleneck. So, maybe they've got a big roadmap for their product and their team is just bottlenecked. And, they're saying, they're telling leadership, hey, it's going to take us 12 months to do this. And leadership says, make it 6. And then, so they're like, all right, well, we're going to carve out these 3 things if we're going to have somebody else do this because they're easy to carve out. Like maybe it's a bunch of integrations with, shipping providers, or maybe it's like some sort of, data ingestion pipeline that's pulling in data from various sources and creating a data lake or something, or maybe it's like some kind of microservice that can be carved out easy. Those folks will bring us in to essentially help compress their timelines and get more done without having to, they don't have a need to hire more employees for the long term because it's a short term burst that they need to achieve. So I like to use the analogy we're kind of like AWS elastic compute when it comes to software engineering. You can spin us up and down, just utilize the resources you need when you need them. So that's one use case. And then the other 2 use cases in that tech, organization model is, we get brought in a lot when, there's a tech team that doesn't understand, they don't have a core competency that we have. So believe it or not, we have a client that we're, getting ready to work with that does not have a CI/CD process. So they're building in Laravel. They've got I think a Vue front end. It might be like more Blade and plain vanilla JS, but either way, they've got an application they're building, and they're like pushing code on like tarballs and SSH, and doing like manual downloads from GitHub, and so they're like, all right, well, we need you guys to come in and like show us how to do CI/CD properly and build out all of this stuff, and help us do TDD and write unit tests and use Selenium and all this kind of stuff. So that's a use case where they don't have a core competency in house. So we're going to come in and help them build that out. Then the third use case is, there's certain companies, especially when you get into larger companies, they like to have a blend of contractors and full-time employees, for a couple of reasons. One, when you go into a downturn, you can cut the contractors more easily. You don't have to worry about severances, and you don't have to worry about all the stuff that goes into having a full-time employee workforce. So there's that. There's like the financial people, the CFOs can get fancy with their CapEx, OpEx reporting, especially if you're a publicly traded company. That's, a good thing to do to show higher profits on your Wall Street reportings. And there's, a number of different reasons, but like bigger companies tend to have some blend of contractors and employees. And so, all 3 of those models, like our global talent workforce side of our business has tentacles into all 3 of those models I just described.
Nice, nice. And then I guess as far as like your workforce, are they like you designate them to different places, or do they kind of just rotate around between all those different divisions?
A little bit of both. So on the first part of our business model that I described, which is the project delivery model, typically folks will be kind of working on 1 or 2, maybe 3 things at a time. On the global talent model, the other side of the business I described, typically it's 1-to-1. So we have, it might be many to one. So we'll have 1 or many engineers on our team assigned to a single client. We don't generally do fractional or part-time engagements that way, though we have. It's more the exception than the rule in that case. And typically, folks do, like we have some clients that we've been working with the same client for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, in just slowly expanding the team. And we might have 5 or 10 or 20 engineers with a single client. We have many clients like that where we've built out pretty large teams that are just long and sustainable over time. And then, we do have a lot of clients as well where it's just, they're like start stop. Like I'm thinking of one client in particular, I won't say their name, but, twice a year they'll come to us and say, hey, we need a team of 4 Vue developers, or, we need 2 Vue devs and a QA engineer. And it's always for like 3 to 6 months. And we come in, we'll get done what they need to get done, and they're like, thanks, it was awesome, you guys did a great job. And then 3 to 6 months later they're calling us again about something else.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's sweet though. I mean, that would from a business owner point of view, I mean, it seems like it makes a lot of sense to, use a service like that. Like you said, just hiring out because, I know as a small business, like hiring out is kind of stressful, because it's like, I don't, if you don't have enough um, money coming in all the time, then it's like, well, now I'm going to have to like not pay these people and not feed them, where I wouldn't feel as bad just firing you.
Yeah, for certain. Yeah, and there's also another element to it as well, which is speed and quality. So because we're not just like a staffing agency that does everything under the sun. We have very specific tech ecosystems that we focus on. Largely, it's over 50% of our revenue comes from Laravel engagements. It's probably somewhere around 55%. So that other 45% gets split up between JavaScript and Python ecosystems. So that's like where we focus. We spend a lot of time in those ecosystems, and it's where we become specialists. So a lot of clients leverage us because they know, especially once they've worked with us, they know that we can turn around a pod for them within a week or less, and also because they know that the folks that we're going to be assigning to them are high caliber. Not just good engineers, but good communicators. We're a consulting company at heart, so we need to know how to talk to people. We need to know how to suss out problems and identify solutions and communicate those ideas to our customers, which ultimately is what whether you're hiring a consultant or a contractor or you're hiring an employee, that's what you want out of an individual contributor on your team. Somebody that can do those things well and consistently. So. A lot of our clients just once they get to know us, they come to realize that they can get quickly a team that delivers at a high caliber, and that's a big value prop we bring. Certainly, when we're working with a new client, we have to show that to them, and we need to be good at sales to get them over the fence to believe that we can do that, and then they can see it for themselves. But that's that's our core competency.
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. It's definitely if you're in that market, you got to check out Curotec. They've actually, man, you've been a sponsor of Laravel News forever. So Curatech, we can't run the website without all the sponsors and everything. So we appreciate you being big in the community, and it's awesome that you're around.
Yeah, we're gonna
That
up our
like
sponsorship too. You didn't even tell me when you launched a higher tier. Oh, you
I'm a
eventually
terrible
told me,
salesman. I'm a terrible salesman. I got to get better at this. But yeah, and well, I was going to ask too. Like, what if what if you have a site or like a SaaS app that's that's chugging along. It's maybe all the code is like just straight PHP. It's not on a framework, and you're like, well, I really would like to move this to Laravel. That I assume that's even something y'all would do there too.
yeah, we've done that a lot. It's less. We've seen it less lately. Although I can think of one or two cases in the last year, but back in like 2015, 2016, we were doing that all the time. A lot of these like old, smelly spaghetti code PHP apps. They're like, hey, no one wants to work here because they can't figure out how to write code. So on our product, so they're like, we just can't hire good developers.
Yeah.
They're like, we need to move to Laravel so we can get good developers here.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is like, what would be the benefit of like rewriting an app in just in like Laravel? And I think you hit the point there. It's because you can actually find developers that can know their way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, because think about it for a second. So, like, Laravel has a standardized architecture in a lot of ways, like how you deal with the database, how you structure the database. Using migrations. It has all sorts of scaffolding utilities, and it's got a standardized way for routing and models and controllers. There's just a really streamlined way to design an application in Laravel. You can definitely go off the books there and do it a non-Laravel way. But if you're following the Laravel way, it's pretty standardized. So if you if you're coming into a fresh code base that's built well in Laravel, you only have to get your head wrapped around what's the business logic, who are the users, why do they use this application, what's important to them, and what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve going forward with this application. So it's more like business stuff and like business goals, engineering goals that you have to get your head wrapped around. You don't have to learn the code base. necessarily. I mean, you have to learn the code base from a business logic standpoint, but not from an architecture standpoint. If you go into
Right.
some spaghetti code PHP app, you have to learn all those things I just said. Plus, you have to learn what the hell the guy before you, or guy or gal before you, was thinking when they wrote it, and like, where's that file? And you're like, you're tracing, stepping through functions, and you're, like, it's a lot harder to do it that way.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. I think my favorite is like when you get a brand new Laravel app is just to go to the routes file and then just follow something. I just follow it through the code, like how everything kind of pulls together.
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly.
it's always interesting. Like those old apps, man, you can find you can find some that's actually pretty good, but then there's others that's just so bad. It's like I don't want to work in this at all.
I mean, remember, it's like before frameworks, you're like looking at like, all right, what's on index PHP, what's on the mod rewrites, and you're like trying to figure out where this thing starts.
For sure. Well, that was going to be my next question. Since you're big into the JavaScript ecosystem too, does is like React and Vue, are they all pretty standardized the way Laravel is, or is it more like hit or miss on who built the app?
um, yeah, it's a good question. When I code, I'm not like a super great engineer anymore. I used to be a decent engineer, I'd say. Now I'm like busy with CEO stuff, so I don't code as much as I used to. When I do code, I pretty much just code in like a pretty basic Laravel environment. Like if I'm just building something for myself to do something that I want to do, I just usually use like a Laravel blade or like a Livewire or filament type of environment. So I don't work a ton personally in the JavaScript frameworks, but from what I understand, I think React is a lot more flexible. Like you can kind of design it the way you want. Like there's some standardization to it, but it's a lot less of a framework, and I think it's still considered a framework, but it's like getting more into the library territory, whereas Laravel is like a true framework. Like it's a fully robust framework with a very specific way on how to do things.
Right, right. Yeah, I got you.
But don't
Yeah,
quote me. I'm
that's
not like I'm not in this stuff every day at the in depth level.
gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say that's one of my favorite things still about Laravel is like you can just like, you're like, oh well, I have this idea, so I'm just gonna spin something up really quick, and you can just throw in, you know, Livewire, Blade, and Laravel, and it's like boom, you can get pretty far without knowing a whole bunch of like JavaScript stuff. That to me, that's pretty crazy that you can get all
Yeah.
that done right from PHP now.
Well, nowadays
Um,
you don't even have to write code. Just throw in your cursor, and you can just prompt what you want. And it just spits out.
This is true. This is true. Uh, I do wonder in the next 5, 10 years if the AI, the autocomplete stuff is going to get so good that it will be able to do all the basic stuff. Like now, I mean, it can do things, but then like, you might get a 1,000 line function just the way you prompt it. I wonder how much better all that's going to get in the next 5 or 10 years. I would think it's going to be a lot better.
I mean, it does more than just autocomplete. We're very deep in AI right now, both building AI functionality into SaaS products and also leveraging AI in our developer toolkit for increasing developer velocity. If you have it set up right, like Claude 3.5 Sonnet's kind of the gold standard right now for AI assisted coding. Uh, you can plug it into your IDE. Cursor is pretty like a native AI IDE, but you can still use like a PHP Storm or like a oh my god, I'm blanking on VS
VS
Code.
Code. Yeah.
I don't use VS Code, so I totally just brain farted. Yeah, you can plug it into VS Code, and other IDEs as well. And it can take your entire application in context. You can run like a local vector store if you want of your application, but it can look at all of your application as a whole. And also you can like run prompts where it's taking into consideration your database architecture, all of it can look at your migrations, it can look at your controllers, your routes, your relationships and your models, all that stuff. It can understand the entire application as a whole and write good quality code. And you can also have it like refactor things too. Like if it gets something wrong, you can say like, all right, I'm getting an error screen, I'm getting an error log, or you don't even have to prompt it. If it displays an error, it can go just read the Laravel log or read the server error logs, and it'll just be like, oh yeah, I see the problem. I'm gonna go fix the code. So it's
Hmm.
pretty powerful. I do think that the future of programming is going to be less of like writing code by hand from scratch, and it's going to be a lot of using these AI assisted toolings. Obviously, the more complex the application gets, the more you need humans to design it and think through it, and there's always like a real world business case that needs to be considered. So at the end of the day, somebody still needs to understand what are we trying to accomplish with this code base? Why is it important? What metrics are we using to measure success? How do we move the needle in the real world? And translate all of those factors into a code design. So there's always going to be like programmers, or maybe it's more of a prompt engineer role in the future, but there's always going to be a need for this stuff. And I actually think in the short term meaning like next decade, or maybe 2 decades, I think there's going to be a massive opportunity for skilled technologists where all of these, like this SaaS boom, SaaS, like largely Silicon Valley and largely all of the venture capital for the last 2 decades has flowed into SaaS companies. So SaaS is the largest venture-backed asset class in tech. There's like life sciences and biotech, which is a different thing, but in tech, SaaS by far has the biggest slice of the pie for where venture capital has flowed. And so there's all these giant SaaS companies. I think there's something like, I think I heard 300 SaaS unicorns or something. Unicorn is a billion dollar or greater privately valued company. And so, a lot of these things can be cloned with AI pretty easily. And, in a lot of these things, like they don't perfectly fit the use case. Like a lot of companies, when they buy SaaS, there's the what's that thing, like the valley of despair, where it's, I forget, like the expectations when buying software. You go like your expectations are so high, and then they start to creep, and then you fall into this valley of despair where you're like, this is terrible. That happens a lot. Like we just implemented HubSpot. We moved from Pipedrive to HubSpot at Curotec, and we had all these high expectations, and we get it in, and it's like, all right, so we just spent like we just doubled our cost and spent all this time moving, and we finally got it to be like pretty much a one-to-one clone to what we had. And it's like, all right, now we can try to unlock all these other things HubSpot does. But either way, it's like these massive products. They have a million configurations, a million buttons, checkboxes, custom fields. It's like so complex to use these things because they're made for everybody. They're not made for us. They're made for everybody. So if you can, and if you're spending, 20, 50, 100, $500,000 a year on SaaS. I was talking to someone recently who spends over $1 million on Salesforce for their company, and they spent several $1 million configuring it and implementing it with consultants, and they're unhappy with it. It's not meeting their needs. So, all right, well, if you could use AI and copilots and AI assisted developers to build everything that you need exactly with the exact fields and the exact naming conventions and the exact relationships and automations and validations on field inputs, everything exactly the way you need it, and you can build that for 200,000, 500,000, even $1 million, and then you have maybe a couple $100,000 a year in maintenance and upgrades and configuration costs. That's, I think that's where it's going. It's going to be cheaper and more bespoke to build software in the future than it is to buy it. And I think we'll see that tide shift over the next few years, and I think there's a at least a decade, if not 2 decade ride that really smart and well-positioned consulting firms will be able to execute on.
Yeah, I do like that too. Just the idea behind that, because like even now, like I was like, I would really like a basic CRM, and I was like, well, I'll go give HubSpot a try, and it was just like instant overwhelmed with everything, and I was like, this has to be an easier way to do all this. So I was like, well, I'll just build my own, and then it's like, well, then you you basically go back to reinventing it. But if you had the AI helping you do all that, then it would probably be worth it, and make basically do it quicker and get exactly what you want, and you would understand it at that point.
Yeah, we do these webinars at Curotec where we do them both to train our internal staff on how to use AI assisted development tools as well as show our clients what's possible. And we did one recently where one of our team lead engineers basically set up the whole stack. He was using Cursor. He got the whole thing all stood up, and then just had like an empty shell. And I think he was using, I want to say it was React with React Native, and he basically said he put together this giant prompt, but it was like, I'll give you the TLDR. It was like, build me a calculator app that I can deploy to iOS. And in like 2 minutes, it was like, it reads the prompt. It's like making files, it's making directories, it's, refactoring. 2 minutes later, compiles, runs it. Literally an exact clone of the iOS calculator app, fully functional. You click the buttons, you could do complex math formulas, and you could compile it down to an IPA file and ship it off to Apple right then and there if you wanted.
That's awesome. Yeah, that would be super nice. The now so this cur so I've not used Claude or Cursor. So Cursor is like an IDE, or am I thinking about this totally wrong?
Yeah, it's so Claude is an LLM
Hmm.
that's built by Anthropic. So Anthropic's the company. Think of it like Anthropic is like OpenAI, Claude is like GPT-4.
Hmm.
So Claude 3.5 Sonnet is their LLM. Cursor is an IDE, but it's an AI native IDE. So it's like PHP Storm or VS Code, but it's like everything about it is built for the prompt window. So it's all designed around plugging. So you can plug Cursor into anything. You can run local LLMs. You can go to Hugging Face and download models from Hugging Face, or you can use like Llama from Meta and run those locally because they're open source. You need to have you pretty much need to have the most expensive MacBook to run them. You need like 96 gigs of RAM and like the highest CPU and the highest GPU, but you can run them locally on your MacBook if you want. And they're fast if you have the specs for it. Or you can just plug it right into Sonnet 3.5, Claude 3.5 Sonnet. You can plug it into GPT-4o, GPT-4o Mini. You just connect it. You just connect it to whatever LLM you want. And then literally you have your code, you have the command line, you have the prompt window. It basically just adds another window to the IDE instead of just having like your file tree and your command line at the bottom and then your code editor in the middle. Now you've got the prompt window off to the right hand side, so it's like you just have an extra thing in there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got to check this out because I've the only thing I've actually used is PHP Storm with the Copilot integration
Yeah,
from GitHub, and it just annoys me more than I like it. So I would I definitely need to give this one a try because
that one
in
is
theory
like
I like it, but it's nah. Go ahead.
that one is like autocomplete, like what you said earlier, where
Hmm.
you can start a function and it'll just kind of guess what you're trying to do, or you can write a comment and it'll write the function for you from your comment. Uh, they do. I haven't used it. I do have a Copilot subscription. I haven't used the new feature, but apparently they do have a prompt window where you can prompt things and it can like take into context your entire application. But Microsoft kind of hit the ground running hard with this whole thing with Copilot. They were first to market, and they're just falling behind. Copilot's kind of old news at this point, and all these new tools. That's the problem with these AI things, though. They move so fast. We have to like retrain everybody every 3 months because what we were doing 3 months ago is completely different than what we're doing now, and it's just moving. I wasn't on the scene in business back then, but it's like, from what I hear of the historical records, it kind of reminds me of like that 1994, 1995 period for the internet where it was just like light speed ahead. Things were changing so fast.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The I was gonna say it's sort of yeah. I'm still amazed at how quick, like you said, all that's moving, and just in the last man, I don't know, 5 years. It seems like everything. Like I remember getting the IDE the first time, and it could like autocomplete variables, and you're like, oh, this is amazing! Like our life is going to be changed. Moving from like Notepad plus plus to this, and then and now it's just like, oh, well, I'll just write your whole application for you, no problem.
So one of my other I have another SaaS company called CrewSnap. My partner Jason, so he's like he's like grew up in the United States. He likes to make life hard on himself, so he turns his entire computer to Mandarin. So his entire MacBook is in Mandarin, all the buttons and everything. And he also still does everything in Vim, 100% Vim. I'm like, dude, how do you do this?
I guess it's a good way of learning a language because you know, kind of like they say, you know, the best way to learn a language is to like go and live there for a, you know, for a year or two. I guess if you change all your buttons around, then you have to learn the language or, you know, read the language anyway. That sounds
But even
terrible though.
like even coding, I was asking him, I was like, haven't you tried like VS Code or something? Haven't you tried an IDE? He's like, I tried, I can't switch. I'm just, you know, I'm just so used to Vim, I can't move off Vim.
Oh yes, people love the Vim. I can't do it, but you know, in theory, I like the idea of it until I get in Vim, and then I'm like, this is terrible. I'm trying. I'm like, I need to go down here and change this variable. Let me hit, you know, what is it, J, like 17,000 times to get to the bottom of this file because I don't know the shortcut to actually jump to the bottom.
I mean, I
Oh,
think it's what do they say? It's like the sign of like a real hardcore engineer.
yeah,
You know, probably Linus Torvalds is coding in Vim, I guess.
yeah. A real programmer loves Vim and regular expressions.
There you go.
Uh, oh man, but yeah, that sounds good. So what else you got coming up in the next year or two related to Laravel? Anything exciting? You going to Laracon next year?
Well, we'll
Well, we don't.
definitely
I
be at
guess
Laracon, no question about that. Has it been announced yet? Do you know where it's going to
no,
be?
not yet.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean Taylor's been coming out with the announcements lately, so I'm curious to see. I guess you know Laravel Cloud should probably be mass released by next Laracon, but yeah, pretty cool what's happening in the ecosystem. So I'm really excited to be at Laracon. We'll be at Silicon Slopes actually in Salt Lake this January. So we're gonna have a booth, and I think we have like 5 or 6 people going from our team, and then we're actually renting out. We're gonna get a party bus and take like 20 or 30 clients and prospects up to Park City for snowboarding and skiing. And we're like renting out a room in the lodge at Park City Resort, and we're gonna do like an après ski with a moderated AI discussion after the snowboard ski day, and so that's our next conference. And other than that, I don't know what else we have on the books.
Love that. I've never been. Well, I guess technically I've been skiing, but it's only been in the North Carolina mountains, which are like not really mountains compared to anywhere out west. So that sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it should be a good time.
Oh, well, I want to say thanks for joining us. And did I miss anything that you want to go over before we call this thing a day?
You hit the nail on the head, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.